Kill your weak self. Rebuild with discipline. I want you to stop for a second. Not scroll. Not skip ahead. Stop. Because what I'm about to say is something most people will never hear, and the ones who do hear will spend the rest of their lives either running from it or being transformed by it. You have two versions of yourself living inside you right now. One of them makes excuses. Sleeps in. Quits when it gets uncomfortable. Scrolls for hours and calls it rest. Eats what it wants, avoids what it needs, and tells you that you'll change, someday. When things are easier. When you feel more ready. When life calms down. The other version, the one buried underneath years of comfort and avoidance and fear, that version is who you actually are. That version is capable of things that would shock you. That version doesn't need motivation. Doesn't need perfect conditions. Doesn't need anyone's permission. That version is waiting. But here is the hard truth. It will never come out on its own. You have to go get it. And to do that, you have to be willing to kill the version of yourself that is standing in the way. This is not a motivational speech. This is not feel-good content designed to make you nod your head and then go back to your old life unchanged. This is a conversation about war. The most important war you will ever fight. And the enemy isn't out there. The enemy has your face. Your voice. Your history. Your habits. The enemy is the weak self you've been protecting. And today, we end it. The weak self, what it is and how it was built. Before we talk about killing something, we need to understand what it is. The weak self is not who you are. It is who you became. Nobody is born weak. Watch a child, a real child who hasn't been conditioned yet, and you will see pure will. Pure drive. Pure refusal to stop. A child learning to walk falls hundreds of times and gets up every single time. Not because someone told them to. Not because they read a book about resilience. Because something in the deepest part of being human refuses to stay down. You were that child once. So what happened? Life happened. And life, for most of us, was a long education in self-protection. You tried something and failed and people laughed. So you stopped trying things that felt risky. You expressed who you really were and someone made you feel foolish for it. So you started hiding who you really were. You worked hard towards something and it didn't work out. So you decided that working hard wasn't worth the pain of disappointment. You were told, directly, or through 1,000 small moments, that you were too much, or not enough, or that people like you don't get those kinds of things. And your mind, which is brilliant and adaptive and always trying to protect you, heard all of that and said, fine. We won't take those risks anymore. We won't want those things anymore. We'll stay where it's safe. We'll stay comfortable. And comfort, over time, became your prison. The weak self is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy that outlived its usefulness. It protected you once. But it is destroying you now. Every morning you hit snooze, that is the weak self negotiating your potential down. Every time you quit before you finish, every time you choose the easy path over the right path, every time you tell yourself you're not ready, not worthy, not capable, that is the weak self running the show. And the longer it runs the show, the more it convinces you that it is simply who you are. It is not who you are. It is a habit. And habits can be broken. The cost of keeping it alive. I want you to sit with this. What has the weak self cost you? Not in some abstract philosophical sense. Actually cost you. In real, concrete terms. Think about the opportunity you didn't take because you talked yourself out of it. Where would you be if you had taken it? Think about the relationship you didn't fight for. The apology you never gave. The boundary you never drew. The conversation you kept putting off until it was too late. Think about the body you've been meaning to take care of. The health you've been neglecting. The sleep you've been destroying. The habits you keep saying you'll fix and never do. Think about the version of yourself you had in mind 5 years ago, the person you said you were going to become, and ask yourself honestly how close you are to that person today. The gap between who you intended to be and who you actually are. That gap is the weak self's work. And here's what makes it even more painful: the weak self doesn't feel like weakness in the moment. It feels like relief. It feels like comfort. It feels like being kind to yourself. That's the trap. Every time you skip the workout, it feels like rest. Every time you avoid the hard conversation, it feels like keeping the peace. Every time you choose comfort over growth, it feels like self-care. But add up 1,000 of those moments and what do you have? A life that looks almost nothing like what you wanted. A person who is almost nothing like who you knew you could be. The weak self doesn't destroy you dramatically. It doesn't come at you all at once. It does something far more effective: it whispers you to sleep. One small compromise at a time. One easy choice at a time. One quiet, comfortable surrender at a time. Until one day you wake up and realize you are a stranger living inside your own life. That is the real cost. And it is a cost most people pay without ever realizing they are paying it. The decision, what it actually means to kill your weak self. Now let's talk about what this actually means. Because when I say kill your weak self, I am not talking about punishment. I am not talking about hating yourself. I am not talking about grinding yourself into the ground until there is nothing left. I am talking about something more precise than that. I am talking about the deliberate, conscious decision to stop letting fear make your choices for you. Every action the weak self takes is rooted in fear. Fear of failure. Fear of judgment. Fear of discomfort. Fear of being seen trying and not making it. Fear of wanting something and not getting it. The weak self has one strategy and one strategy only: avoid anything that feels threatening. And because growth feels threatening. Because change feels threatening. Because becoming someone new requires leaving someone old behind, and that feels like dying, the weak self will fight you every step of the way. Killing the weak self means looking at the fear and choosing to move anyway. Not the absence of fear. Movement in spite of it. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire, commanded armies, survived betrayal, disease, loss, and war, did not do those things because he was fearless. He did them because he had trained himself to act despite fear. Because he understood something most people never grasp. The obstacle is the way. Not around it. Not under it. Not waiting until it disappears. Through it. Every single time you choose discomfort over comfort, you weaken the weak self. Every single time you do the hard thing when everything in you is screaming to stop, you rebuild something stronger in its place. This is not a metaphor. This is neuroscience. Every time you override the impulse to quit, every time you push past the resistance, your brain literally rewires itself. The pathways that said stop become weaker. The pathways that say keep going become stronger. You are not just changing your habits. You are changing your brain. You are rebuilding who you are at the most fundamental level. But it requires a decision first. A real decision. Not a wish. Not a vague intention. Not a New Year's resolution that you revisit every January and abandon by February. A decision made in the quiet, with no audience, no applause, no external reward, just you and the truth of who you want to become. Have you made that decision? The rebuild, discipline as the architecture of a new self. Once you make the decision, you need to build something in the weak self's place. And that something is discipline. Not the discipline that looks good on social media. Not the discipline that involves expensive equipment and dramatic morning routines designed for content. Real discipline. Boring discipline. The kind that happens when no one is watching. The kind where you wake up and do what you said you would do even though you're tired. The kind where you keep the commitment you made to yourself even when it would be easy to break it. The kind where you treat the promises you make to yourself with the same seriousness you would treat a promise made to the most important person in your life. Because here is something profound, and I want you to really hear this. Most people keep their promises to others but break their promises to themselves constantly. You would never tell a close friend you'd meet them somewhere and then just not show up. You would never commit to a colleague and then simply decide you didn't feel like it. But you do that to yourself every single day. You promised yourself you'd start. You didn't. You promised yourself you'd stop. You didn't. You promised yourself things would be different this time. They weren't. And every broken promise to yourself, every single one, is a message your subconscious receives loud and clear: I am not someone who follows through. I am not someone who can be trusted, even by myself. Discipline begins the moment you start keeping promises to yourself. Small ones at first. Deliberately small. Because the goal isn't to transform overnight. The goal is to build a track record with yourself. To accumulate evidence that you are someone who does what they say. Get up when the alarm goes off. Every time. Drink the water. Every day. Do the work you committed to. Even for 20 minutes. Even when it's hard. Move your body. Even when motivation is completely absent. These things, in isolation, look small. They are not small. They are the bricks of a new identity. Discipline is not what you do on your best days. Discipline is what you do on your worst days, when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when nothing is working and no one is watching and it would be so easy to just stop. That moment, that exact moment of resistance, is where the rebuild happens. Every time you push through it, the new self gets stronger. Every time you surrender to it, the weak self gets its breath back. The Stoics called this ascesis, deliberate practice. Voluntary hardship. Not suffering for its own sake, but the purposeful choosing of difficulty in order to train the will. Epictetus, who was born a slave, who had no power over his body, his circumstances, his physical freedom, became one of the most psychologically free human beings who ever lived. Not because his conditions changed. Because his discipline over his own mind was absolute. He understood what most people never grasp: the only thing that is ever truly yours is how you respond. Your circumstances can be taken. Your comfort can be taken. Your health, your relationships, your money, your status, all of it can be taken. But your discipline, your ability to choose how you show up regardless of conditions, that is yours. And no one can take it from you. Build that. Protect that. Feed that. The daily practice, what the rebuild actually looks like. Let's get practical. Because philosophy without application is just entertainment. What does this actually look like every day? It starts the night before. Before you sleep, you make a decision. Not a long complicated list. One thing. The most important thing you need to do tomorrow. The thing that, if you do it, makes the day a success regardless of what else happens. Write it down. Commit to it. Sleep. When you wake up, before your phone, before the noise, before the world starts demanding things of you, you do that thing. Not after coffee. Not after checking messages. Not after you feel ready. Before. Because the weak self lives in the gap between waking up and starting. Every minute you spend in that gap, the weak self is negotiating. It is building a case for why today is a bad day to start. Why you're too tired. Why tomorrow makes more sense. Close the gap. Move before the negotiation starts. This is what the Stoics called the morning discipline, and it is the foundation of everything. After that, guard your inputs. What are you feeding your mind in the morning? Because your mind, first thing, is like soil, completely open, completely receptive. Whatever you plant in it will grow. If you plant anxiety, news, social media, other people's drama, you will grow anxiety. If you plant purpose, your goals, your values, your vision for who you are becoming, you will grow purpose. Choose your inputs with the same intentionality you would choose what you put in your body. Then, and this is critical, embrace the hard thing in every area of your life. When you feel resistance, move toward it. Not away. Your body wants to quit the workout. That is exactly where you stay. Your mind wants to avoid the difficult task. That is exactly what you open first. Your comfort is screaming at you to stop. That is exactly the signal to keep going. Not forever. Not beyond reason. But past where the weak self would have stopped. Because growth does not live in comfort. It never has. It never will. Growth lives at the edge of what you think you can handle, just one step past where you wanted to quit. Go there. Regularly. Deliberately. And finally, end every day with honesty. Not judgment. Not punishment. Honesty. Ask yourself, did I do what I said I would do today? Where did the weak self win? Where did the new self win? Not to feel guilty. To learn. To adjust. To show up better tomorrow. The Stoics called this the evening review. Seneca practiced it every single night. He would ask himself 3 questions before sleep. What did I do wrong today? What did I do right today? What can I do better tomorrow? Simple. Honest. Consistent. That daily accounting, that willingness to look at yourself clearly without flinching, is one of the most powerful practices available to any human being. Most people avoid it because it's uncomfortable to see yourself honestly. But discomfort, as you now know, is exactly where the work is. The identity shift, you are not fixing yourself. You are becoming someone new. Here is something I need you to understand before we go any further. This is not about fixing yourself. The language of fixing implies that you are broken. You are not broken. You are unfinished. There is a profound difference. Broken things return to what they were before they broke. Unfinished things become something they have never been. You are not going back to some previous version of yourself. You are not trying to recover something you lost. You are building something that has never existed before. A version of you that is harder. Cleaner. More honest. More present. More capable of doing what needs to be done without requiring perfect conditions or external validation or the mood to be right. This is an identity shift. And identity shifts are the most powerful and permanent changes a human being can make. Because here's how behavior actually works. Most people try to change their behavior directly. They set goals. They make plans. They create systems. And sometimes it works for a while. But the moment pressure comes, the moment life gets hard or chaotic or discouraging, the old behavior floods back. Because the identity underneath the behavior never changed. You can't consistently act against your identity. The mind won't allow it for long. If you believe, at your core, that you are someone who quits, you will quit. Even when you're trying not to. If you believe, at your core, that you are someone who follows through, you will follow through. Even when conditions are against you. So the goal isn't to do disciplined things. The goal is to become a disciplined person. The goal isn't to have a good day. The goal is to be someone who has good days because of who they are. The goal isn't to kill the weak self once. It is to rebuild your identity so completely that the weak self has nowhere left to live. What you will lose, and why that's the point. I want to be honest with you about something. This process costs something. When you kill the weak self and begin to rebuild, you will lose things. And some of those things will be painful to lose. You will lose certain relationships. Not because you become cold or arrogant, but because growth changes you, and not everyone in your life wants you to change. Some people are comfortable with the version of you that stayed small. That version didn't challenge them. Didn't make them look at their own life. didn't remind them of the work they're not doing. When you start doing the work, some people will pull away. Some will become critical. Some will call it a phase. Let them. The people who are meant to walk with you into who you are becoming will step forward. The ones who were only comfortable with who you were will step back. Both of those things are exactly as they should be. You will also lose the comfort of your excuses. And this loss is underestimated. Excuses are not just lies we tell other people. They are a kind of shelter. They protect us from the full weight of responsibility. When you had a bad childhood, or a hard circumstance, or an unfair situation, those things are real. They happened. They mattered. But the moment you decide to rebuild, you give up the right to let those things be the reason. Not because they didn't hurt you. They did. Not because your circumstances weren't unfair. They may have been. But because the moment you pick up responsibility for your own life, fully, with no exceptions, is the moment you become genuinely free. The Stoics were ruthless about this. They did not allow themselves the luxury of blame. Not because the world was fair, they knew it wasn't. But because blame, however justified, is always a transfer of power. The moment you blame something outside yourself for who you are, you give that thing power over who you become. Take that power back. It doesn't matter how it was taken from you. What matters is that you reclaim it. The long game, why this is a lifetime practice, not a phase. I want to set something straight before we close. This is not a 30-day challenge. It is not a season. It is not something you do until you feel better and then put down. Rebuilding yourself with discipline is a lifetime commitment. And I say that not to make it feel heavy, but to free you from the pressure of perfection. Because if this is a 30-day challenge, then every slip is a failure. Every bad day breaks the streak. Every moment of weakness means you're back to zero. But if this is a life, if this is simply who you are choosing to be for the rest of your days, then a bad day is just a bad day. A moment of weakness is just a moment. And tomorrow is exactly what it always was, a chance to get back to work. The Stoics did not pursue wisdom as a destination. They pursued it as a practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote the same lessons to himself, in his private journal that was never meant to be published, for decades. He wrote about patience and discipline and controlling his responses and acting with virtue over and over again. Not because he had mastered it once. But because mastery of the self requires daily renewal. You will fall. Count on it. You will have days where the weak self wins. Where comfort wins. Where you look at what you ate, or didn't do, or said, or avoided, and you know. You know it wasn't the person you're trying to become. On those days, do not spiral. Do not punish. Do not use one bad day as evidence that you are unfixable. Rise. Return. Resume. That is all. The warrior who falls and gets up is not the same as the warrior who never falls. The one who falls and gets up knows something the other one doesn't, that the ground is survivable. That falling is not the end. That the rising is where the strength is built. Fall. Rise. Repeat. For the rest of your life. So here we are. You came into this video one person. I hope you leave it as someone who has made a decision. Not a loud one. Not a dramatic one. Just a quiet, private, unshakable decision that from this moment, the weak self no longer runs this life. That the comfort that has been keeping you small is no longer worth the price you pay for it. That the version of you buried under years of habit and fear and avoidance deserves to finally come out and be lived fully. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to wait until conditions are right or motivation arrives or fear goes away. You just need to begin. Today. With one decision. One action. One moment of choosing the harder, truer thing. That is how empires are built. Not in grand gestures, but in the 10,000 small moments where a person looked at comfort and chose something greater. You are capable of something greater. Go build it. Before you leave, if this reached something real in you, I want to ask you one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Not as a favor. As a commitment to yourself. Because this is what we build here. Every single week. No shortcuts. No empty motivation. No content designed to make you feel good for 5 minutes and then forget. Real conversations about real transformation. The kind that actually changes how you live, how you think, how you show up when no one is watching. This community is for people who are done with the version of themselves that plays small. Who are ready to do the actual work. Who understand that discipline is not punishment, it is the highest form of self-respect. If that is you, subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell. Share this with one person in your life who needs to hear it tonight. And come back next week. Because what is coming next will go even deeper than this. I will see you there.